I still remember the day my son looked me in the eye and said, "Mom, it's time to sell the house. It's too old and it's not worth much anymore." His voice was calm, almost caring, but there was something in his tone that made my stomach twist. That house, it wasn't just bricks and walls. It was where I carried him in my arms for the first time, where his father died, whispering, "Take care of him." I looked around the living room that still smelled faintly of cedar and coffee. Every crack on the wall had a story. And yet, my only son wanted me to erase it all with one signature. I smiled and asked, "Why the rush, David?" He avoided my eyes. "I just think it's the right thing to do, Mom, for both of us." That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window, staring at the old oak tree in the yard, the same one David used to climb as a boy. The wind made it creak like an old secret trying to speak. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. And deep down I knew. He didn't want to sell the house because it was too old. He wanted to sell it because of something hidden inside. Before I tell you what I found, let me ask you this. If your child asked you to sell the home that held your entire life, would you do it? My name is Margaret, and I'm 71 years old. My husband and I bought this house in 1984, when our son David had just learned to walk. It's a small home, with red roof tiles and cream-colored walls, nestled at the end of a quiet street lined with oak trees. Not luxurious, but full of memories. Every brick, every window frame carries the traces of a life once lived. My husband George passed away 12 years ago from a heart condition. Since that day, I've lived alone. I still sweep the yard, still cook dinner for one, and still talk to his photograph every night. Some people might call it loneliness, but to me, this house is the only place where I can still hear his laughter, still see him sitting on the porch, reading the paper. David, our only son, grew up in this house. He was once our pride and joy, smart, ambitious, always saying, "Someday I'll take care of you, Mom." But time changes everything. When David got married, I cried tears of happiness. My daughter-in-law, Linda, was a city girl, modern, well-spoken, polite. But soon after the wedding, I began to feel a distance between us. Linda rarely visited, and when she did, her eyes would wander around the house as if she were walking through an old museum. Once, she said half-jokingly, half-seriously, "Mom, if you sell this house, you could live in a nice apartment, closer to us and much more comfortable. Why stay here all alone?" I smiled and brushed it off, but my heart grew heavy. After that, David started bringing it up more often. What began as a suggestion became advice, and then pressure. "Mom, I've done the math. If you sell the house, I can help you invest the money. You'll have a monthly income." You don't need such a big place anymore, Mom. It's just extra work to clean." Every word felt like a needle in my chest. I knew my son meant well, or at least I wanted to believe he did. But there was something in his tone, a strange urgency that didn't sound like love. It sounded like a plan. One afternoon, David came over with a folder in his hands. "Mom, all you need to do is sign. I've checked everything. This is the best offer you'll get." I looked at the paper, rows of tiny letters, cold numbers. I asked quietly, "Who's the buyer?" David avoided my eyes and forced a smile. "A friend of mine. He's in real estate. Don't worry, Mom. He's trustworthy." I said nothing. I could only hear my heart pounding in my chest. After he left, I sat for hours in the living room, staring at our wedding photo. George was smiling in that picture, and I was resting my head on his shoulder, peaceful, safe. I whispered, "George, if you were here, what would you tell me to do?" That night, I dreamed of him. He was standing on the porch, his hand resting on the old wall, his voice soft but firm. "Don't sign, Maggie. Something isn't right." I woke up with a start. Outside, rain tapped gently on the roof tiles. I got up, opened my drawer, and took out my notebook. I began writing down every word David had said, every number, every date. Something deep inside told me this wasn't just about selling the house. It was something much more serious. The next day, I called my old neighbor, Mr. Harris, who used to be my husband's lawyer. He was surprised to hear my story, then fell silent for a long moment. Finally, he said quietly, "If your husband were here, I believe he'd want you to review every ownership document carefully. That house might not be just a piece of property." A chill ran down my spine. A house, not just a home, not just memories. Then what else could it be? That question haunted me for many sleepless nights. After that talk, David began visiting me more often. But strangely, every time he came, the warmth was gone. His smile was forced, his eyes evasive, and his tone short, almost cold. "Mom, have you thought more about selling the house?" "Mom, property prices are dropping. If we wait too long, we'll lose the deal." I looked at my son, the boy I once loved more than anything, and felt a deep, painful distance. Somewhere along the way, between us, an invisible wall had risen. One evening, David came with Linda. They sat in the living room, speaking politely, but there was something in their glances that I couldn't quite understand. I made tea, brought it out, and pretended to stay busy in the kitchen to give them space. But their voices grew quieter and quieter, as if they didn't want me to hear. I gently cracked the kitchen door open. I only caught fragments. Linda's voice, sharp and anxious. "If your mom doesn't agree soon, the bank will start getting aggressive, David. You know that." David's reply came low and tired. "I'm trying. She's starting to suspect something." My hands went cold. The bank? What were they talking about? My heart raced. I stepped back, gripping the teacup until it burned my hand. When they left, I sat at the dining table for a long time. Their words echoed in my head. The bank, getting aggressive. She's starting to suspect. Then I began to understand. Maybe the house wasn't just an asset, like they claimed. The next morning, I went to see Mr. Harris again, bringing the folder David had given me. He greeted me with a worried look. After reading through the papers, he frowned. "Margaret, you said your son prepared all these contracts himself?" "Yes. He told me I just needed to sign." Mr. Harris tapped his pen on the page, his expression darkening. "Then there's something off here. This isn't just a sale contract. There's a section called temporary authorization. If you sign this, David would have full power to transfer or mortgage the property without your further consent." I trembled, gripping the edge of the table to keep myself steady. "What do you mean mortgage?" I asked. Mr. Harris hesitated. "It means your house may already be listed as collateral for a loan. I need to verify it." On the way home, the cold wind slipped down my collar, and no matter how I pulled my coat tight, I couldn't stop shivering. Not from the chill, but from a growing fear inside my chest. That night, I didn't turn on the lights. I sat in the dark, the moonlight spilling through the window. In my hands, I held a photo of David as a child, smiling brightly, holding the red kite George had built for him years ago. I whispered, "My son, why did you have to lie to me?" The next morning, I decided to stay silent. I wanted to confirm the truth myself. I pretended to agree with David's idea, saying I needed a few days to organize my documents. For a brief moment, his eyes lit up, and that tiny flicker of relief convinced me that my instincts had been right. I started observing carefully. Whenever David and Linda visited, they always carried a black folder. Every time I stepped out of the room, they leaned close and whispered. Once, Linda left her phone on the table when she stepped outside to take a call. The screen lit up with a new email notification. Urgent. Property transfer, collateral agreement. I froze for a moment, then quietly placed the phone back as if nothing had happened. But my heart had already turned to stone. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed and opened an old drawer. Inside was the original property deed, the one George had signed over 30 years ago. At the bottom, in the notes section, was a line Mr. Harris had once explained to me years ago. This property is attached to shares in Parker & Sons Construction. Parker & Sons, that was David's company. And suddenly, everything made sense. My son had used my name and this house to take out a loan for his company. And now that everything was collapsing, he wanted me to sell the house to save himself. I dropped the paper, my hands shaking uncontrollably. Tears fell onto the edge of the table, mixing with the silent ache I couldn't put into words. I didn't know what hurt more, the betrayal itself or the fact that the betrayer was the very child I had trusted completely. I looked up at the ceiling, the dim light casting shadows on the cracked old walls. "George, can you see this?" I whispered. "The son you left me has used this very roof to betray me." The next morning, before dawn, I woke early. The sky outside was pale gray, the air crisp and cold. I put on George's old sweater, stepped onto the porch, and took a deep breath. I knew that from this day forward, I would no longer be the quiet, enduring mother. I had to know the truth, no matter how painful it was. I called Mr. Harris and told him everything, The conversation between David and Linda, and the email titled Collateral Agreement. He was silent for a long moment, then said softly, "Margaret, stay calm. I'll look into the mortgage and ownership records. But please, don't say anything to them yet." I nodded, though he couldn't see me. Inside, I felt a fire. Not the fire of anger, but of resolve. 3 days later, Mr. Harris brought me a folder. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a copy of the bank statement, my name listed alongside David's company as a guarantor for a $1.2 million debt. I sat frozen in place. He really used my name? Yes, Mr. Harris sighed. And if his company collapses, the bank has the right to seize your home. But fortunately, you haven't signed the sale agreement yet. The property is still entirely yours. A faint, bitter smile appeared on my lips. All my life, I had taught my son to be honest and kind. I never imagined the day would come when that same son would deceive me, to save himself. That night, I sat at the dining table under the soft yellow light. Before me were 2 folders, one from David, one from Mr. Harris. I looked at the cold, lifeless words on paper, then at the old wedding photo. George was still smiling in it, calm, trusting. "George," I whispered, "maybe it's time I learned to be as strong as you always hoped I would be." I began to write my plan, step by step. First, I would pretend to agree to sell the house, so David would believe I had softened. Then, I would insist on meeting the buyer face to face, to see who was truly behind it. And finally, I would transfer full ownership of the property into a charitable trust, one that serves the community, ensuring no one could ever take it again. I knew I was about to stand against my own son, but if I stayed silent, I would lose everything, not just the house, but my self-respect. The next day, I called David. My tone was calm, almost light. "Son, I've been thinking maybe you're right. Selling the house isn't such a bad idea." On the other end, his voice was full of excitement. "Really, Mom? I knew you'd understand. I'll take care of everything." I smiled faintly, though my heart ached. "All right, but I have one condition. I want to meet the buyer in person." There was a brief pause. Then David replied quickly, "Of course, Mom, I'll arrange it." And at that very moment, I knew my son had just walked into his own trap. That night, I sat on the porch listening to the wind rustling through the oak trees. My heart was both heavy and light. I thought about other mothers, women who might have been betrayed, used, but still couldn't stop loving their children. Then I looked straight ahead, as if into the camera, as if speaking to you, the one listening to my story. If one day you discovered that someone you love was hiding a painful secret from you, what would you do? Would you forgive or stay silent to set things right? Leave your answer in the comments below. Because maybe, just maybe, your answer will remind me that I'm not alone. And if you believe that every mother deserves respect, no matter how much her children may change, hit subscribe so you won't miss the next moving stories on Voices of Auntie Tae. Every week, we share journeys of tears, love, and awakening. You might be the next person who finds a part of yourself in them. Before night fell, I stood up and gently closed the wooden door. I knew this game had only just begun. And this time, I would be the one in control. 3 days later, David called. His voice sounded light, almost relieved, as if a heavy burden had just been lifted. "Mom, I've set the meeting. The buyer wants to meet you this Friday at Greenfield Law Office. They'll bring all the documents." I kept my tone calm. "Good. I'll be there." That night, I organized my papers and prepared the original property deed, not to hand over, but to set a trap. I also asked Mr. Harris to come with me, waiting at a cafe across the street, just in case something went wrong. I knew I was stepping into a chess match, and every move had to be careful. Friday. The sky was overcast, heavy clouds thick like they were ready to burst. I put on George's brown coat, grabbed my folder, and walked into the Greenfield building. The meeting room was small, cold, and sterile. David was already there with Linda. Beside them sat a man in his 50s, dressed in a black suit, thick glasses perched on his nose. David stood up and forced a smile. "Mom, this is Mr. Cooper. He represents the buyer." I looked at the man. His eyes didn't meet mine. They locked on the folder in my hand, the gaze of someone who only cared about papers, not people. I sat down, resting my hand lightly on the documents. "Mr. Cooper," I said, "I hear you're interested in my house?" He nodded politely. "Yes. We believe it's a valuable property. If you sign today, we'll wire the payment within the week. Everyone have know by the comes of it now. I tilted my head slightly and smiled faintly. He paused for a moment. Sterling Group Investments. I looked directly at David. Do you know this company, David? He looked down, his voice strained. Yes, I've heard of them. I slowly reached into my bag and pulled out a sheet of paper. To be honest, I've heard of them too. I had someone check. Sterling Group is the company that buys foreclosed properties from banks, the same banks that hold your company's debt, David. The air in the room thickened. Linda's face went pale, and David stood up abruptly. Mom, you're misunderstanding. This is just a normal business deal. I smiled, but my eyes filled with tears. Normal, David? You were going to sell your mother's house to pay off your debts and keep it from me until the very end? Linda spoke up, her voice trembling. We just wanted to save the company. If we didn't, we'd lose everything. I looked at her, this woman who once called me Mom on her wedding day, now avoiding my gaze. And what about me, Linda? Was I supposed to lose everything instead? No one answered. Outside, the rain began to fall, soft at first, then heavier. I slowly gathered the documents and stood up. I won't sign, and from this moment on, neither of you will ever use my name for anything again. David's voice broke. Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't have any other choice. I looked at my son, my heart shattering. There's always a choice, David. You just made the wrong one. I turned and walked away. Each step tore something inside me, but with every step, I felt lighter. Outside, Mr. Harris was waiting. He nodded at me, his eyes filled with both admiration and sorrow. That night, I sat alone in the quiet house. The rain still fell outside, drops sliding down the roof like fading memories. I lit a candle, looked at our family photo, and whispered, I've lost my husband, and today I almost lost my son, but at least I still have my home and my dignity. I looked straight into the camera, as if speaking directly to you, watching this story unfold. If one day someone you love tries to take away what's most precious to you, would you stay silent, forgive them, or stand up to protect yourself? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, because sometimes just one word from you can comfort someone else going through the same pain. And if you believe that justice doesn't only come from the courts, but from the courage of mothers who refuse to give up, subscribe to Voices of Auntie Tae so you don't miss the next part. Every story here isn't just about tears, it's about the strength hidden within those who once seemed the weakest. I turned off the light and sat quietly in the dark. Outside, lightning flashed, illuminating the wall where George once hung the blueprint of the house he built for us. I looked at it, and I knew. My battle wasn't over yet. The days after that meeting, the house returned to its familiar silence. But this time, that silence carried strength. I no longer sat around crying or waiting for my son's call. I began to act. I went to Mr. Harris's office, the property deed in my hands. He looked at me, his eyes asking silently, Are you sure? I nodded. I don't want my son to lose everything, but I can't let him keep living a lie. I need to do this to protect what George built and to teach David what responsibility truly means. Together, we prepared the documents. I decided to transfer full ownership of the house into a charitable foundation named after my husband, the George Foundation for Single Mothers. The house would become a training center for women who lost their husbands or had been abandoned, women who once stood where I did. When I finished signing, I set down the pen and felt a strange calm wash over me. No one could ever take this house again. No one could ever use my name to borrow money again. The house now had a new soul, one of compassion and justice. That afternoon, David came by. His face was tired, hair disheveled, dark circles under his eyes. After everything that had happened, the company must have truly been collapsing. He stood in the doorway, his voice hoarse. Mom, I know I was wrong, but can you help me one last time? If I lose everything, Linda will leave me. I was silent for a long time. It was the moment I had feared most, yet I was calmer than ever. David, do you know something? I said softly. People only truly grow up when they lose what they've taken for granted. You always thought I'd be there to save you, but I can't anymore. Please? He lowered his head, his voice trembling. I don't want to lose you, Mom. I was scared to fail. I looked at my son, the man I once held in my arms, now shaking like a lost child. I placed my hand gently on his shoulder. Failure isn't what destroys you, David. Lying is. I didn't call the police, but I've transferred this house into a charity foundation. It's no longer mine, and it's no longer yours." He lifted his head, stunned. "You did this to punish me?" I shook my head. "No, I did it to teach you. I don't need to win. I just need you to understand." David broke down crying. For the first time in years, I saw real tears fall from his eyes. He dropped to his knees, clutching my legs, his voice trembling. "Mom, I'm sorry. I'll start over. I promise." I stroked his hair as tears rolled down my own cheeks. In that moment, I realized true revenge isn't about making others suffer. It's about making them face their own mistakes. That night, I opened the window and looked out into the garden. The old oak tree stood there, aged yet unyielding. The wind brushed through its branches, sounding like George's whisper. Softly, I said, "George, did I do the right thing?" And somewhere in the wind, I thought I heard his gentle reply. "Yes, Maggie. You've kept what mattered most, your kindness." "Your kindness." I smiled. For the first time in months, I felt truly at peace. I looked straight into the camera, as if speaking to you, the one watching this story. Sometimes, silence doesn't mean weakness. It's the strength of those who have loved, forgiven, and still found the courage to rise again. Leave a comment below if you believe that some wounds can only be healed through forgiveness. I read every comment, every story you share, because I know each story carries its own lesson. And if you, too, believe that the greatest strength a person can have is the ability to forgive without ever forgetting the lesson, subscribe to Voices of Auntie Tae to join me on these journeys of tears, faith, and awakening. That night, I lit a small candle on the table. Its soft light flickered across George's framed photo, reflecting in my tired but peaceful eyes. And in that moment, I understood this story wasn't over yet. But from here on, I had finally found myself again. When everything had settled, I thought life would return to its quiet rhythm. But a few weeks later, I received news. David's company had officially gone bankrupt. The bank seized all assets, and Linda left without a single word. They said she moved back in with her mother, leaving David amidst the ruins. Hearing that, my chest tightened, not out of anger, but sorrow. A mother can endure any pain except watching her child fall apart. 3 weeks later, David appeared at my door. He was thin, unshaven, his clothes wrinkled and worn. Gone was the confident, ambitious man. In his place stood someone crushed by his own mistakes. I opened the door without a word. He just stood there, eyes red and wet. "Mom, I have nothing left." I quietly pulled out a chair. "Come in, son. Sit down." David sat, his trembling hands clasped together. I don't even know where to start. I did everything out of fear of losing everything. But in the end, I lost it all anyway. I lost Linda, the company, and I lost you. I looked at him, the man I once cradled in my arms, now sitting before me like a lost child. I poured a cup of hot tea and placed it in front of him. "You haven't lost me yet, David. But you need to learn how to live without lies." He broke down crying, a heavy, choking cry that sounded like rain after years of drought. I stepped forward and wrapped my arms around him. The feeling was strange, yet so familiar. "You know," I whispered, "when you betrayed me, I didn't hate you. I was just afraid you'd end up hating yourself." David buried his face in my shoulder, sobbing. "Mom, I want to start over. I want to become the man Dad would have been proud of." I smiled, tears rolling down my cheeks. "Then start today." In the days that followed, David stayed home with me. He helped clean the garden, repainted the old fence, and spent long hours studying the documents of the George Foundation for Single Mothers. He offered to help manage the records, organize training sessions for women in the neighborhood. For the first time in years, I saw my son work not for profit, but out of gratitude. One afternoon, as the sunset bathed the porch in gold, David brought me an envelope. "Mom," he said softly, "this is the first money I've earned since starting over. I want to donate it to Dad's foundation." I looked at my son, my heart swelling with emotion. I knew this was what true redemption looked like. I never needed him to be rich. I just needed him to be kind. That night, I sat by the window, watching the lamplight reflect off the old wooden table. The house was still the same, yet somehow it felt different. Now, it wasn't just a shelter. It was proof of love, loss, and forgiveness. I looked toward the invisible camera, as if speaking to you, the one watching this story. Have you ever forgiven someone who broke your heart? If yes, write one word in the comments, forgive. Because sometimes forgiveness isn't for them, it's for your own peace. I read every comment you leave, every story you share, because each word holds a piece of the human heart. And if you believe that compassion is the most noble form of revenge, subscribe to Voices of Auntie Tae now. Every week, we bring you true stories about family, betrayal, and the courage to find light again in the darkness. Your one click doesn't just support the channel, it spreads kindness to thousands of others. When night fell, David sat beside me and asked softly, "Mom, do you ever regret not selling the house?" I smiled. "No, son, because if I had sold it, I might have lost you too." We sat in silence, listening to the wind rustle through the oak trees outside. The old house was no longer a burden, it had become a witness to a powerful lesson. True love can never be bought or sold. Time moved slowly, but it was fair. The house, once filled with pain and guilt, now echoed with laughter and voices. The women who came here in despair now had work, confidence, and most importantly, each other. I often sat on the porch in the afternoons, watching them cross the yard with hope in their eyes. Sometimes I'd see David standing by the doorway, smiling gently as he helped them carry boxes. I knew he had changed. He was no longer the man obsessed with money, but one who had finally learned the true meaning of life. One day, David asked me, "Mom, did you ever hate me?" I smiled. Yes, I did. But then I realized, hatred only makes the heart heavier. Forgiveness is lighter, and it lets you keep your dignity. You're a lesson I'll never forget. David bowed his head, tears falling again. I placed my hand on his shoulder. And I've learned something too. Sometimes you have to lose something to realize what truly matters. I looked up at George's picture on the wall. He still smiled gently, his warm eyes seeming to say, "You did well, Maggie." I whispered back, "George, our house isn't just a home anymore. It's become a place of healing for those who once had nowhere left to go." At night, after the women from the center went home, I often stayed behind, writing in my journal. I wrote to George, to David, and to myself. I wrote to remind myself that silence isn't weakness and forgiveness isn't surrender. Once, I reread the very first line I ever wrote. My son asked me to sell the house. I didn't. And that decision didn't just save the house, it saved his soul. I closed the notebook, feeling a deep, quiet peace within me. And I want to say this to you watching this story now. If you've ever been betrayed or hurt by someone you love, don't let that pain turn you into someone you're not. Stand tall, with strength and kindness. Sometimes the best revenge isn't making them suffer, but letting them see you living happily, peacefully, and with self-respect. 10 years have passed since it all happened. The house still stands, simple, warm, filled with the scent of old wood, and freshly banal, the garden is always filled with laughter. The laughter of women and children. They call this place the George Houses, the house of kindness. As for me, my hair is now completely white. I no longer teach or work much. I simply sit on the porch, brew tea, and listen to the new stories shared every day. David still lives here, but he's no longer the reckless man he once was. He now runs the foundation, helping dozens of people rebuild their lives. One afternoon, my granddaughter Emma ran into my arms, holding a crayon drawing, a little house with a big oak tree and 2 smiling people. "Grandma, is this our house? Daddy said you saved it." I laughed softly and kissed her forehead. "No, Emma, I didn't save this house. This house saved our family." David overheard from the doorway, his eyes glistening. He said quietly, "Mom, I want Emma to grow up knowing that family isn't just blood, it's how we choose to love each other." I nodded, my heart suddenly warm. In that moment, I realized every loss, every betrayal, every tear had led to this. A new generation that understands the true value of kindness. As the sun set, the golden light touched the wall where George's old photograph hung. David lifted Emma in his arms and said, "This is your great-grandfather, the man who built this house with Grandma." Emma asked, "Daddy, is great-grandpa in heaven?" "Yes," David smiled, and he's smiling now because Grandma and I finally did the right thing. I sat nearby, my heart light as air. And I understood. Legacy isn't made of walls or bricks. It's made of love and the lessons we leave behind. That night, I opened my old journal. The pages were yellow, the ink blurred by tears long dried. I added one final line. Every person has a house within their heart. If we protect it with love, it will never collapse. I set down the pen and took a deep breath. Outside, the wind carried the scent of wood and jasmine, and the laughter of my granddaughter. It was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. I want to speak to you, the one who stayed until the end of this story. If you're going through a storm, don't lose hope. Maybe today you've lost something, but believe me, every loss carries a lesson, and every wound can bloom again. If you believe love can heal every mistake, leave one word below: love. I truly want to read your story, because perhaps your experience will be the light that guides someone else who's lost their way. And if this story warmed your heart, subscribe to Voices of Auntie Tae to continue this journey with us. Every week, you'll find new stories where pain turns into strength and tears become the light that leads us home. Every click to subscribe is more than a button. It's a promise that we still believe in kindness, in change, and in family. As the moon rose high, I sat alone on the porch, watching the old oak sway in the wind. Inside, David and Emma's laughter filled the air, a song of peace and new beginnings. I closed my eyes and whispered, "George, can you see it now? Our house has found its new keepers." And in the wind, I could almost hear his deep, gentle voice. "Yes, Maggie, you've left behind a legacy, not of wealth, but of love." I smiled. The night sky was calm and tender. And I knew, in the end, love had won. Leave a comment below if you feel the same. Just one word, strong, to let me know you too have faced pain and still chosen kindness. I read every comment, every confession, because I believe that each story we share can reach someone who desperately needs hope. A soft breeze drifted through the curtains. I smiled. This house had weathered storms, but now it stood as a lighthouse for the lost. I know that one day I'll grow older, my steps slower, but when I leave this world, it will be with a smile, because I lived fully, loved deeply, and stood for what was right. Before turning off the light, I looked straight into the camera, as if speaking to thousands of you watching me through the screen. Thank you for staying until the end of this story. If my story touched your heart, please hit and subscribe to Voices of Auntie Tae right now. Each week, we share true stories of family, betrayal, and awakening, to remind you that no matter how cruel life can be, there's always a path paved with love. Click subscribe now, and leave a comment saying strong if you believe that kindness is never weakness. I closed my journal and blew out the candle on the table. The thin wisp of smoke rose, fragile yet warm. And in that final flicker of light, I heard George's voice whisper from somewhere far away. "You kept the house, and more importantly, you kept yourself." You kept yourself. I smiled, and I knew, at last, the story was complete. Tonight's story ends here. A house was saved, but more importantly, a heart was redeemed. I believe that each of us has a house like this, not made of stone or wood, but of love, memories, and the people we can never bear to lose. When I tell this story, it's not just about Margaret or David. It's about all of us, those who have been hurt by the ones we love the most. But through it all, we learn one simple truth. Love isn't just about giving, it's about knowing when to stop, to protect what's right. If you've ever been betrayed, forgotten, or struggled to hold together a breaking family, remember this: you're not alone. The stories on Voices of Auntie Tae are told so you can find a part of yourself in them, and so you'll know that forgiveness doesn't make you weak, it sets you free. I invite you to share your feelings after watching this video. Have you ever forgiven someone you thought you never could? Write a single line in the comments, because sometimes one small story can touch 1,000 hearts. And if you believe every tear deserves to be heard, subscribe to Voices of Auntie Tae so you don't miss the next episode. Here, we tell true stories of tears, awakening, and the power of love. In our next story, a mother believes her daughter has gifted her a new home until she discovers it's not a gift, but a trap. That story will show you that even love that's been taken advantage of can become the greatest source of strength. Thank you for staying until the very end. I'm Auntie Tae, and this is Voices of Auntie Tae, where voices from the heart are heard with the heart. See you in the next video. And remember, taking it remember. And remember, taking it remember in last and a telden remember. And remember taking it remember. Every story we tell has the power to heal a broken heart, maybe even yours. Thank you for listening to today's story. If it touched your heart, subscribe to Voices of Auntie Tae. And don't go just yet. The next video is waiting for you, with another journey of tears, truth, and awakening. Ked bread every morning.